things I always get asked is, what is a brand? Is that a logo? And I usually breathe in and say, no, it is so big. And to really start defining and framing what a brand is a journey. And I've been on that journey for a long time to understand what does it mean to have a brand, what is a brand. It's something that I'm really interested in my own work as an entrepreneur, but also globally how brands affect us. And we won't get into that side, we'll get into more, really what is a brand. So before that I'm going to brand myself, this is my personal brand. So my name is Maya Zuckerman. I am the founder of Transbay, which was more, in the past, an agency that ran a bunch of meetups around where storytelling is technology. One of the things we also did was collaborate with HardwareCon and started the first and second and third HardwareCon conferences, and Hardware Massive is something that came out of that. So I was a co-producer on 2 of the first ones. I also co-produced a couple of other really big events in San Francisco and the Bay Area. One is Prototype of the Future, around smart cities, smart greener cities, and also was part of the very big team that ran Clean Tech Open, which is the biggest accelerator for clean tech in the world. We ran this big 5-day conference earlier this year. But again, as I said, I'm branding myself, so my background actually is from visual effects, animation, and gaming. And also worked in working with big brands to actually bring their stories into the market, so big audiences like Salesforce, Google, Deloitte. And I really look at brand narrative, this bigger conversation of what is a brand. And some other work that I do there on the right, I'm also a writer, I write sci-fi, I'm into sci-fi, I'm into futurism. I'm soon going to be part of an interesting group that's going to look at ethical design in AI and AS, autonomous systems. So I'm really interested in this bigger ecosystem of conversation, and branding is exactly that. Since actually I said yes to this event, I also have taken over being VP of operations for a new stealth startup, a social venture in more of the health, wellness, and let's call it education world right now. We're still very early on, even though the name is there, but we have almost no presence. So that's me in a nutshell. If you want to reach me, I've got some information on how to get in touch. But now let's dive into what is a brand. So I look for a lot of infographics, and we know what brands are, but we just can't encapsulate what that means. Is it just a logo? Is it an image? Is it a way we interact with it? Is that the way we feel about it when we see it? Like, you know, there's different emotions that you're going to have looking at these names. Like, some of them are awesome. Some of them is, why the hell is that here? Well, I just chose a cool image, so I was looking for images that really just show us how brands are all around us, that encapsulate everything we do. Every decision, we actually think about a brand that might work for us. Like, I want to eat healthy, so I'll go to Whole Foods and buy my food there. Or if my personal brand is more of kind of an urban, hipster, hippie, techno, utopian, I might go to the farmer's market because that's my brand. So brands are a very big idea. And we're trying to actually see what is that for an entrepreneur to actually understand about their brand journey when they're starting a company. So let's move to the next one. So kind of a little bit of a history of the brand, because it comes from the Scandinavian term brander, which means to burn. Like the idea of branding cattle, that's where the brand comes from. So it's literally we're putting the metal on our idea. We're giving it a focus. So that's what really truly a brand and idea is. But it's still a very big, nebulous concept, that especially for startups, especially for entrepreneurs, are like, okay, so when do I put the branding process into my conversations? Like, when do I need to think about it? And by the way, I put the logo of the brand there, Wikipedia. So, and that's what brands, when I need to go and find out the information, I go to Wikipedia. That's the brand that I understand and associate in the teens of the 21st century with knowledge, is Wikipedia. You know, you even say, did you wiki it? Like, I call it Rabbi Wikipedia. I go and ask them questions. So what the hell's a brand? And I had these little silly things. And, you know, we looked at, you know, what is it? Is it strategy? Is it a logo? Is it marketing? Is it advertising? Is it identity, design, value, trust? It's all of it. It's this big conversation. And it involves all of it. But as a startup entrepreneur, you might ask yourself, like, where do I start with this? Like, when do I even start this conversation? So, you know, again, what I started saying is, what is it? So there's a lot of books around it. I was kind of even doing for this talk a search of what do the different people think a brand is, and I found about 100 different exact conversations, and none of them are hitting it on the nail of what a brand is, because it's not a thing, it's an ecosystem. So it's a framing. A frame of something is not it, it's just a frame, it's what's around it. So it is how you talk to your audience, it's how you differentiate from your competitors, it's how you focus on what you want to bring to the world. So it's not, it doesn't need to be exactly like that. You know that it's not like a competitor's. You can actually say, you know, our brand is different than a competitor's. This beautiful speakers are different from the Dynaudio ones that I have at home, because there's a different process in the story and the narrative around this speaker. So there's a different use for it, so that's a differentiator. And it also, you know, one of the things that it's interesting because I've crossed so many verticals of so many industries, and one of my biggest things that is always interesting to me with the beginning of any project is that the entrepreneur, the movie maker, the creator always are thinking about, well, it's my thing that I'm bringing to the world, it's my creation. And I would say, yes, but that creation needs to be seen by somebody. Who's your audience? Who's your client? So it's also about what are you trying to project out, but also thinking about your audience, what are they trying to see? And if there's no conversation from the beginning about it, usually that product, brand, service won't succeed. And sometimes it won't succeed for other reasons, but that's like the basic of not even thinking about who your audience is. Getting here. That's good. Way too fast. So this is the best question that I always get. When do you start thinking about the brand? So I always argue, and I even had that argument with my CEO because I'm like, no, we're starting now. Like, this is the beginning of our project. We're starting to talk about the brand now. He's like, yeah, but why do we need a logo right now? I'm like, it's not about the logo. It's about a bigger conversation. And that is actually, you know, a lot of times when people hear brand, they hear logo, they hear identity, which is part of that conversation, but it doesn't need to be in the beginning. You don't have to come up with the perfect logo in the beginning. I didn't bring huge examples of other companies, but we could just, you know, if you ever seen what Apple's first logo was, it was really ugly. It was some lithograph of mutants sitting underneath a tree with the apple falling down. It took a long time, you know, 30 years of iteration to come to what we know as the Apple logo. So, not that we don't want to send out the world with the best thing we put forward, but also it's more of, let's call it the Buddhist detachment. It's like you want to make it as good as you can, but also you got to detach from the fact that this is not going to be the best ever logo in the beginning. It's going to iterate, it's going to grow. And also because as design moves, design what you think is amazing and looks amazing and might be amazing at that point in time for designing your specific logo, in 5 years' time might look dated, so you got to evolve and iterate. So the beginning of the conversation is the beginning of your service, the beginning of talking about your product is when you actually start talking about your brand. It's that vision, mission, value proposition. That is part of your brand statement. That is part of who you are bringing to, what you're bringing to the world. So, you know, I talked about the business model generation because that's a tool that I think any startup that doesn't work with should, because it just makes everything really, really much easier. I'm going to talk a little bit about it, but going to show of hand who doesn't know about the business model generation canvas and how it's working. Everybody knows about that? You don't know, awesome. So please come talk. Okay, 3 more people. All right, cool. So let's actually move into that. So, and this will actually take you on a journey that is not what people usually think is a brand. It's not immediately about the colors and the logo and the brand statement positioning. It's actually a little bit earlier. It's at that wonderful beginning of when we actually start talking about a product or a service. So the idea of distilling your mission and vision and deciding how to translate it into a product. That's the beginning of when you actually start talking about your brand. It catalyzes inspired thinking that helps you to re-examine, strengthen, or fine-tune the concept of your business. That's actually when you start talking truly about your brand. That's the brand. So that is a conversation that when we say the brand, it's this bigger ecosystem. It's everything. It's your vision, your mission, your business model, all part of it. Because it's also not only how you're discussing it between the coworkers, but you're also starting to discuss it with other stakeholders. And you got to be very fluent in what your brand's conversation, your brand language is. So this is from Strategizer.com, the inventors of the business model canvas. There are very awesome new iterations of that. There's Lean Canvas, there's all these other ones. I can show you one more that I've been using for a while now. And they also have, I think, a 42-page demo book that you can download, a PDF. They can just take you through the process. But it really is a very, very simple process. So most people like to ask where you start on this process. I usually start with the customer segment and then start going into the value proposition and then start filling up all the other things. Because like usually after that, once you kind of understand who your customers are, what segmentation, audience, where you define that, then you also are starting to have a conversation of what the value proposition is, like what are you bringing to the world. And then you can actually be very specific and focus on the activities, the sources, then you actually start talking about the business model exactly, and that kind of takes you through the journey of, a startup in a box. I mean, I've ran and have been part of so many hackathons and startup weekends, and 45 minutes come up with a new product, and we use this, and it just helps you define everything. And sometimes also, entrepreneurs tend to be shiny object people. You might go way too big and have all these amazing ideas of what your product will do day one. This is a great space to bring it back in and go, okay, this is what we're working on right now, and this is the conversation. It's simple, it's agile, it's specific. So highly recommend to start there. But as I said, the brand conversation already starts here. Next one. So this is so the value proposition, there's actually a value proposition canvas. It really helps you solidify the conversation of, what are the gains and the pains of your customer, and what is the gains, pains, or the levers, the products and services that you're going to offer. It answers those very, very simple questions, but it's also a place for starting to have that conversation of the brand is going to offer this to our audience. The brand is going to talk like this to our audience. These are the specific products that we're going to offer. So it starts helping with establishing the messaging as well. Because we are trying to answer a need or a pain for your audience. And that's what we're here to do, right? Or beyond, if it's not a pain, make life better. Like, I'm going back to your product. Like this product is like, yeah, maybe I don't need it, but if I go to a festival and I have one of these, it's a conversation piece, it's cool, it's going to make everybody happy, so, it's creating an extra value to the narrative of why would I want to buy a speaker. So, I mean, that's a lot of the things that you're trying to bring into the conversation. So this is another moment where you really need to always be thinking about the brand, because there's initiation, like when you're forming the vision, mission, statement, value proposition, you're got to think about how you are addressing the world. But there's another step, is when you actually are talking to that first audience. And the audience definitely could be an investor. If you're coming to an investor with, I have an idea, and here's a piece of napkin, and that's it. Or a very, unless you're an amazing salesperson and also a person that's been, this is not your first startup, this is your 5th startup, so you can talk to your investor buddies and go, hey, will you put a little bit of money in here and there, shake your hand and say yes. I've seen that, but if this is the first product you're doing or the first vertical that you're trying, you've never been in that vertical, when you show up to the first investor meeting, you gotta have your brand talk already. You gotta have some identity around it, some messaging that's unique to what you're trying to bring. If it's just a PowerPoint that's black and white with no any identity, it's never a good thing. It doesn't show any kind of impeccability, any kind of we've thought about this process. We didn't just show the product, we're showing everything around it. We're also thinking about the marketing, we're thinking about the messaging. It's not, unless it's like something unbelievable, nobody's going to give the money after just seeing a PowerPoint. It needs to be much more, a simple PowerPoint. It needs to be more thought through. And that shows that you're thinking of the audience. Even if in this place is just the investor, they're still the audience. There still could be a stakeholder. So, the way you come to them is the way you come to everyone. So, the idea of actually moving into that more conversation piece of this is not only about our product, this is about how we go to the world. So, yeah, and we move forward with, if it's beyond the investors and beyond like the inner circle, then the next circle, and then the next circle. And you iterate that messaging and that look and feel. So, and I brought this back in because the conversation that I've heard is like, oh, we need to get our business model perfect before we even look at the brand. And especially Silicon Valley, like the whole world, we're agile, we iterate a lot, we test a lot, we move really fast. MVPs are things that people do, so if it just looks like a skeleton of nothing that you haven't thought about the bigger marketing conversation, it's not going to fly. So looking at the bigger brand, the bigger story is quite important. And it takes time to get that right messaging. It's an iterative process. So if somebody sees that you're actually iterating and all of a sudden like you meet them 2 months later and your brand has evolved, that's also part of it. It's not only the product evolved, everything around it, like the whole scrum is moving nicely forward. All the teams are playing nicely together. That's much more of an investable company or a company you want to be part of than just the product moved, but the marketing didn't move, and this didn't move, just the idea moved. It sends a different message to your stakeholders, especially in the early stages. And like being in an early stage startup right now, like we actually are thinking about it all the time. Our logo in 5 months changed 3 times because we're like, this is still not right. It's not the right messaging. We got to move from these colors. These colors are not right. This is not. We did some research on the colors and on our audience, and also now that we're moving into UX, will the colors work in UX? Now that we're developing we keep doing that, so we keep actually thinking about the whole brand as we move forward. So, how to create a strong brand? And this is even before we talk some logos and tones and all of that. So, create a clear positioning. What makes you different than everybody else? And what do you want to be recognized for? You can't be, I'm probably going to say it in a minute, right? But you can't be everything for everybody. You can't be, we're the solution for everything in the market. There's 7.3 billion people on this earth. Right now, where we're standing, there's enough audience to go around. Why are you different? What is your niche? And how do you find those people? Define a strong mission and vision. That's internal and external. If your mission and vision doesn't excite you, A, why are you doing it? But B, like, don't excite anybody else. If you're not, this is what I want to do. I want to alleviate the suffering of 8 billion people, and I'm going to do it this way. And that's going to be 100 years, right? Define a strong mission and vision. Share your story. So. There's a big, especially when you're earlier on in the stage, depending on where you are. In the beginning, you might be stealth, but there's also sharing stories within meetups, within people that are, might be investing in you, might be networking with you, so telling them about what's happening, that also helps you as a lot of us might be in startups that were like 3 to 5 people, so getting the team to talk about it a lot and talk with other people, gets the excitement going, gets the brand and the messaging better, you learn how to actually hone in on the story, so that's extremely important at this stage, to continue talking about it. Unless you're in like some stealth reason that you have to be, can't talk about anything. But most of us, you know, if we're creating an idea that we can't execute on, then somebody else is going to execute on it, so might as well talk about it. I know that the company, I can talk to people later about the company that I'm part of. We know that's an execution play, so we talk about it with everybody. I just didn't want to go through the long pitch, because I don't want to pitch today. I want to talk about branding. So communicate clearly, communicate value, build brand ambassadors. It's a big one. It's really important. Get your team as you grow to be your brand ambassadors, then your stakeholders, then your clients and audiences. You know, there's a whole art in creating a great brand ambassador system and how you actually tell people to promote, give them the right information, how you build that within your audience. It's a whole other big thing, but brand ambassadors, especially these days, are extremely important. Create a living brand. It's ongoing, it's iterative, it's it's iterative, it continues, like not being locked to this is it and we're never going to move from it is not a great idea. Like actually being okay with, make it a little soccer. Yeah, good. Yeah, alright, well, something like so strong. Create a living brand and create a memorable brand. You know, memorable brands are the big brands. Like we see them when something happens to us because of the history. Like it's 10 years for the iPhone. I mean, I know I have a lot of friends who go between Androids and iPhones. I can't leave iPhones right now because it's connected to my Mac and it's connected to my iPad. And now I have to use. What about now? No, can you hear me? Good. Okay. And other brands, you know, some brands go from being really positive in our brains to being very negative. I don't know, when I see Coca-Cola, all I think about is people with really problematic health issues and the fact that that brand is everywhere in the world and you can't escape it. So that's me, and I haven't had a Coke in like 20 years. But, you know, growing up, there was Coca-Cola everywhere. And at the end of the day, you deliver the best product or service. And best is a very hard thing to quantify. You know, there's a before agreements, be impeccable with your world and all that. One of the things I say is do your best. So that's very objective. It's like what's best for you. That's one. And the purpose of brand development. So really kind of a very quick timeline. Year 0 to year 1 to, you know, might be startups that are further down the line, but it's just like a framing to think about. You know, year 0, you're framing your brand, you create a lead brand, you identify in first communication to look credible and get people interested. And the way it might look in your content, because that's part of the conversation, that's part of your messaging. You know, you write PR blogs, you create playtest events, and you know, you do your social, you do all these other things. Then, you know, year 1 to 2 is when you establish the company, you fine-tune your biz model, you then, you know, achieve scale to mainstream audience, you start building the brand to the outside. And in year 1, you're still, you know, incubating it. And then, you know, you move from pilot project to, you know, more adoption of the brand. So if the pilot project, the beta, is successful, there's all of these conversations around it. Of course, the brand is going to be foremost in the language that you're going to have, the copy on the website, the look and feel, the tone, the palette, and then it's going to actually translate into everything you do around the brand, whether it's your social media, banners, but also things like, you know, I call it the brand dictionary, words we use, words we don't use, and of course then it goes into marketing, SEO, all of that. But it starts in that conversation. So this is kind of the big brand development process. And this is from a couple of books that I really love around that, that look at very lean branding. And I love this very simplified way of explaining something extremely complex that takes a long time. But it gives you a little bit of where do I start, especially when you're starting to talk to external brand people, if you don't have your own branding person in-house and you're starting to talk to agencies. This, and I think the next slide will give you a little bit of a framework of what to look for and what to think and what to understand about the milestones we're looking at. So, you know, the first level is brand sensing, and that's the beginning. The business development, the positioning, framing your offer, setting the goal, planning and budgeting, and getting support. And the planning and budgeting is of the product and of the brand development. So it's identity, positioning, language, messaging, all of that need to be part of that conversation. And the getting support is always good, like don't do everything by yourselves. There's different levels of support you can get out there, from just amazing designers everywhere to full-on agency level support, depending on your budget. Then the number two is brand thinking, you know, create the concept for the core brand, defining departure points, like where do you move from here to here, like do you stay, no startup goes in a straight line. It's like you're going to be moving and pivoting. Define your identity, think about experiences, and experiences could be anything from, you know, creating events to creating a campaign to creating all kinds of touch points, and planning for action. Then making of the brand, when you get to a point where you're actually creating the visual and verbal identity. So that's, you know, everything from your brand guide, logo, positioning, all the language around it. And of course, this is not a 1, 2, 3. Usually it's like 1, then we jump to 3, then we come back to 2 because we forgot something along the way. I mean, it's not a perfect, in any ways, it's not a perfect process. And then, you know, first experiences would be here, you know, websites. If this is hardware mostly focused, if you're a hardware company, you'll have to have a website, even if it's a beginning website for your product. It could be that you don't even have a website in the beginning, but you have a Kickstarter or Indiegogo or one of those, so that kind of identity. So there could be some videos as well. And then you launch and go to public, and it could be, are you launching your product, or are you launching a Kickstarter, which is, you know, before you even a hardware startup, you're at the product that you're trying to, I think there's an interim. It's like a maker to startup. It's a maker to scale. That's what was HardwareConf was all about. That great place between you just made something, you tested it on Kickstarter or Indiegogo, you're successful, and now you're going to build a company around it. So I mean, that's going to be interesting flow of launch and when launch is ready. For instance, for my company right now, launch for us is our first beta. We have an online product, it's a tech product. So it's different yet very similar. And then the brand building. That's when, after you launch, you got to continue this iteration, continue building, continue, you know, putting the fire into the brand world, the brand ambassadors, create rich experiences, evolve, iterate often, and ongoing communication. So depending on what your product or service is, you got to also think about leading that conversation around it. Like, for instance, this is a good conversation on, you know, you're not maximizing your little office cubicle, your little office space. So, you know, you need to be a leader in that conversation. Like, hey, this is the way to solve it, but also, hey, did you know that if you don't do that, you might have more problems with your back, or this is not really helpful to be productive, or all these kind of conversations you might have. If this is just a marketing tool, if you're actually building a product from the ground up, yes, you go. It's not even full stack anymore. You go React or one of those frameworks. But that's, of course, going to be in the higher levels of the right column for all that work. One of the things also, you know, in the last one, you know, videos, high-level videos start to come into place. Storytelling and brand narrative in a much bigger way come into place. You know, all of your communication materials can be developed on a very high level. So it starts being like a much bigger approach to then getting a brand out there. And this is before marketing, right? This is before all these conversations. So again, it's different levels, and a lot of times we do things as entrepreneurs by ourselves. So, you know, the conversation this is what you can get with vendors. what do you need to do by yourself is all that work we talked about before, all the positioning and the vision and the business plan and the business model and the messaging that you want. You might be able to get somebody to help you with fine-tuning, but the messaging is yours. You got to go and do the market research unless you hire somebody to do that. I mean, all those things need to be ready from your side when you actually talk to specific vendors like that. They're not going to do the work for you. So it's still a lot of work, but to have a really, memorable brand, you got to do the work and you got to hire the right people for that. But also, as I said, it's iterative. Like, if you are a company, or not even your pre-launch company that has a product that's going to first go on Kickstarter or Indiegogo or one of the others, you definitely probably want to have a logo, you probably want to have a look, but you want to have something that can be iterative and you can actually send it out, and then as you grow, add more. You don't have to have all the bells and whistles from the get-go. So it's also picking and choosing what's really important for launch and what's really important for talking with your audience. Next one. Questions after? Is that okay? Yeah. So this is just I just thought it was pretty beautiful, and I love charts. So I love charts that actually bring the messaging in one place. So if I talk about an ecosystem of the brand, it's got everything here. So it really talks about this, kind of brings it all together, what we just talked about. The brand essence, the mission, value, and vision, the brand promises, so that's at the next level. The visual identity, so that's logo and tone and graphics and what is the right imagery to go with and what is the right language and the text and all of that. And then the verbal identity, that's the messaging. And then we go into what are we doing, products, services, technology, communication channels, partnerships and collaboration, all of that. So basically, this is the big conversation of what is in the brand. And it's much bigger than usually what people talk about, so that's why I wanted to bring you a bigger ecosystem conversation. And I leave you with this memory, this idea, this H to H, human to human. We live in a time where, we've been talking B2B, B2C, people always talk about that, but when you're communicating about your brand, you also have to remember that it's a human-to-human communication. We're storytelling creatures. This is what we do. This is why we create these weird things around us. This is all story. All of it is ideas that came to our brains and then we created them. That's how we navigate in the world. So if we forget that the audience is actually people, if we don't get into their heads and understand why they would ever want to buy something from us, then we miss the point. So a memory of remember to say, this is a human-to-human conversation always. A brand is something that humans create. In this country, I still don't understand that apparently brands and corporations are people, but we can have a whole conversation about that later. But it is about the human connection. It is about what is the change you want to bring to the world through your services and your products, or how do you make the world better with your product and your service in there. So with that, I will finish and I'm open up for questions.